Good day, everyone. I am Rhea Laila Domingo, and together with me is Carol Diol. And now we are going to discuss about the agrarian reform efforts under Marcos.
President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in 1972, which gave him the authority to wipe out the landlord-dominated Congress. With the help of his technocrats, he was able to increase the power of executive branch, aiming to reshape the government fundamental restructuring, including addressing the deep structural problems of the countryside. After the proclamation of martial law, he issued the Presidential Decree No. 27, also known as the Code of Agrarian Reform of the Philippines. So let us first define what is agrarian reform. Agrarian reform is the redistribution of the land regardless of crops and fruits produced to farmers and regular farm workers who are landless. It aims to distribute land to tenant farmer, particularly in rice and corn producing areas. The following are the provisions included in Presidential Decree No. 27. First is the land ownership for tenant farmers. Tenant farmers, regardless of whether the land is classified as landed estate or not, were granted ownership of a portion of the land suitable for a family-sized farm. This allocation was 5 hectares for non-irrigated land and 3 hectares for irrigated land. Second is the retention by landowners. Landowners were allowed to retain an area of up to 7 hectares provided they were cultivating or intended to cultivate. Third, land valuation. The value of the land was determined as 2.5 times the average harvest of 3 normal crop years preceding the decree promulgation. Fourth is the payment terms. Tenant farmers were required to pay for the land over a period of 15 years through equal annual amortizations. The total cost included an annual interest rate of 6%. In case of default, the amortization due shall be paid by the farmers' cooperative in which the defaulting tenant farmer aided a member, with the cooperative having a right of recourse against him. So the government shall guarantee such amortization with share of stock in the government-owned and government-controlled corporation. Fifth is the conditions for land title. No title to the land owned by the tenant farmers under this decree shall be actually issued to the tenant farmer. They would only receive the title to the land once they became full-fledged members of the duly recognized farmers cooperative, and this shall not be transferable except for the hereditary succession or the government in accordance with the provisions of this decree. Since we all know what are the provisions of the Presidential Decree No. 27, let's proceed to the Operation Land Transfer. Operation Land Transfer aimed to redistribute agricultural land to tenant farmers and landless rural workers. It was part of the broader land reform program initiated by President Marcos in the 1970s. Under Operation Land Transfer, agricultural land owned by large landowners were targeted for redistribution to qualified beneficiaries. The process involved identifying eligible beneficiaries, assessing the land to be transferred, and facilitating the legal transfer of ownership. Another noteworthy agricultural program during Ferdinand Marcos' presidency was Masagana 99. This initiative aimed to boost rice productivity across the Philippines by providing support to farmers. Under Masagana 99, farmers were given the opportunity to borrow money from banks to purchase up to 3 hectares of land by empowering farmers with access of financing and land ownership. Together, Operation Land Transfer and Masagana 99 represented concerted effort by the Marcos government to address the rural inequality and stimulate agricultural development in the Philippines.
Alright, let's talk about what happened with agrarian reform in the Philippines after 1986. So after Marcos was removed from power and the new constitution was put in place, In 1987, there was a big focus on agrarian reform. The new president, Corazon Aquino, really wanted to make agrarian reform a big deal during her time in office. But here's the thing, Aquino herself came from a rich family that owned a huge piece of land called Hacienda Luisita. In 1987, Aquino announced her plan for agrarian reform. Then in 1988, the government passed a law called the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, or the CARL. This law aimed to redistribute agricultural land from rich landowners to farmers who worked on the land. The landowners would get paid for their land, but they couldn't keep more than 5 hectares for themselves. Also, companies that owned land could choose to give shares of their company to their workers instead of giving up their land. But there were problems. During Aquino's time, not much land actually got redistributed. Only about 22.5% of the land was given to farmers in 6 years. One big reason for this was the government didn't have enough money to pay the landowners. Plus, some people criticized Aquino for allowing her own family's land, Hacienda Luisita, to give out shares of their company instead of giving up the land. When Ramos became president, he tried to speed things up with agrarian reform. But it was still tough. By 1996, they had only distributed about 58.25% of the land they were supposed to. So in 1998, they changed the law to give them more time to finish the job. So after 1986, there was a lot of talk about agrarian reform in the Philippines, but it was hard to make it happen because of money problems and other challenges. In 1998, President Ramos signed Republic Act No. 8532 to extend the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or CARP, for another 10 years. This extension aimed to deal with problems like not having enough money and running out of time to finish the job. It showed that the government was still serious about helping farmers get their own land. CARP wanted to give land to farmers, but it had problems because there wasn't enough money and some people didn't want it to happen. After 1986, the Philippines tried to fix unfair and ownership, but it was hard because of changes in government and rich people not wanting to share their land, especially when the president's family was involved. After 1986, agrarian reform in the Philippines faced many challenges and controversies. Even though programs like CARP had limitations, they showed how important it is to share land fairly for everyone's benefit. The extension of CARP meant the government was still committed to making agrarian reform work despite the difficulties. And that was the end of our report. Thank you for listening.